Madam Chairman, I have had the pleasure of knowing Ezra Taft Benson and W. Cleon Scouts. They were wonderful men who understood the rule of law. I know they are held in the highest esteem by many people, especially people who often agree with the positions of our opponents tonight. Here's what Ezra Taft Benson wrote about the proper role of government and the rule of law. Quote, "An important test I use in passing judgment upon an act of government is this. If it were up to me as an individual to punish my neighbor for violating a given law, would it offend my conscience to do so? Since my conscience will never permit me to physically punish my fellow man unless he's done something evil, or unless he has failed to do something that I have a moral right to require him to do, I will never knowingly authorize my agent, the government, to do this on my behalf," end quote. And this leads me to a second basic element that I believe describes another of our differences. Is it evil for anyone, anywhere in the world, to desire to live, work, and raise their family in Utah? Our opponents tonight seem to imply that it is, as they so thoroughly regale us with their list of horribles. But how can living here undocumented be evil when a lack of legal status isn't even a crime? Stealing a person's identity is wrong. It's a felony. But are we surprised this occurs to the arguable degree it does when our entire system of legal immigration is broken? Unjust, corrupted, and broken down laws can create lawbreakers where they otherwise wouldn't exist. So when an entire nation is culpable for its bad laws, and we're all to blame at some level, how hard do we want to be on otherwise innocent people without first fixing unrealistic, impractical, broken down laws? Real crime perpetrated with evil intent is a different matter. That we can do something about, and we must. Documented or undocumented, real criminals need to be caught and punished appropriately. But being a real criminal has nothing to do with someone's legal status. And if we really want to start catching serious criminals within the undocumented immigrant community, the last thing we should do is introduce Arizona's approach to Utah. Every intelligent conservative knows the power of community, the power of highly active and involved neighbors works best to keep crime down. We want our undocumented neighbors to rise to the surface of society where they can help keep our communities safe. An Arizona approach in support of tonight's resolution only serves to drive these neighbors underground where they're of no assistance. We can see where support of tonight's resolution can lead. It leads to dismantling families and picking on women and children, especially the children who through no fault of their own now live in Utah. It leads us to assume the worst in people. We begin to demonize a whole community. A real crime committed by an undocumented immigrant starts to sound like all undocumented immigrants committed that crime. And that, in turn, starts to sound like all Latinos are criminals.
Yes.
And that starts to sound irrational. I know our friends here tonight in support of this resolution don't want to sound irrational. I know they simply want to help, and the first step in helping is to reject punitive actions based on broken down, unrealistic laws. Bad laws cannot be our standard. At the very least, prudent lawmakers won't base their future ideas for new laws on bad laws. Meanwhile, as the federal government is working towards solutions, or until it ever does, Utah can do what it can to maintain our public safety, protect our freedom, and promote our economic prosperity. We can help lift everyone to the surface of society where everyone is accountable to one another. We can turn suspicions into trust, unproductive behavior into productivity, and despair into hope. Justice is most often served when we leave people with some hope. People without hope can become desperate and will resort to anything to survive. Undocumented immigrants might have come to Utah in desperation, but we shouldn't want them to remain desperate while they're here. Take their hope away, especially in a punitive manner, and we'll see many more problems before we ever see any lasting solutions. During last year's Republican primary for the United States Senate seat, I interviewed Tim Bridgewater and Mike Lee together and posed this question. As Latter-day Saint men, let's say you are assigned to watch over your neighbor and his family. You get a call one night and your little child is sick. You go next door, you minister to the child and console the family. In that tender moment, this Hispanic family reveals to you that they're in the country illegally. Do you go back home and call federal authorities and turn them in? Both candidates, Tim and Mike, strict rule of law men, as they would define themselves, answered no. They wouldn't turn in their neighbor. Decent people don't do that. If those two men won't enforce federal immigration laws when the situation presents itself personally, if the federal government itself can't or won't enforce broken down federal immigration laws, then why should we unwisely task state and local law enforcement with it? Thank you, Madam Chairman.